and we'll see how this goes. I've never tried the transcription before, so I don't know what that'll do exactly, but welcome everyone to the 2023 Moqui conference, and see more people joining still. So yeah, we're starting to gather. Looks like we're getting a good crew. It's been a few years since we've had a conference. It was before COVID. The last one, if I'm remembering right, was at the MK Decision headquarters in San Diego. And extend the thanks again to Guru Dharam and others who helped arrange that. And now the main physical location is at the Alchemy offices in Dallas, Texas, which is sort of an extension of MK, if you will, having acquired them. When was that? 2021, if I remember right? Yeah. So this is our post-COVID conference, and it's good to see everyone, and it's great we could have some people meeting in person and there. And I apologize I couldn't meet. I had other things that came up that conflicted. First one where I was looking into travel overhead and all, and then more things came up, and so it's important that I be here. I've moved. I guess a lot of people are aware of this, but I've recently moved from Washington State to Missouri, and living closer to family here now, which is nice. As my parents are getting older, and it's nice to be close to family again. What I wanted to talk about to open the conference is a little bit about the history and then the present and future. So the Ebenezer Scrooge's three ghosts, if you will. The history of Moqui goes back now about 13 years, started in 2010, although it was mostly just a concept at that point. It wasn't until 2014 that things sort of took off, and that was when I personally transitioned from doing OFBiz consulting to Moqui consulting full-time. And so that's another part of the history of Moqui, is the Open for Business project, which I started in 2001, and not long after joined up with another project. And that Andrew Zaneski was running, and he's still around, I guess, doing consulting work and stuff, but I haven't caught up with him in a long time, so it would be, I should do that sometime. But so in the early days of OFBiz, it was largely e-commerce focused, but we were working with the data models from the Data Model Resource Book by Lynn Silverstone, which I guess Matt Warnick was going to talk a bit about in one of the sessions coming up. So so that is a key part of the history of OFBiz and later Moqui. And so early on, OFBiz had some sort of ERP type features, but it was more like an e-commerce admin app, and there wasn't much in the way of accounting and such, mostly order management. We got into some more elaborate warehouse management and inventory management over time, but that was largely the focus. It evolved in a way that led to a bit of a mess over time, if you will. I guess that'd be the easiest way to put it. So that was all of us involved were young and inexperienced and had worked on some projects and related things, but it was very much a learning experience going along and kind of figuring out what the best tools were at the time. But the tools you see in Moqui, a lot of those ideas evolved during those early years in OFBiz, including the idea of using a service-oriented architecture, which was becoming popular for server-to-server communications, but using that internally in an application was kind of the idea of the OFBiz service engine, and that then later led to the service facade in Moqui. So that's one thing you'll notice about the difference between OFBiz and Moqui is in OFBiz, everything's an engine, and in Moqui, everything's a facade. So um, the reason for the name change there is I see those as sort of a not so much as a tool that does a bunch of stuff hidden behind the scenes, but rather an interface for different types of tools that um, that provides an easier layer for using them. So that's especially true of the entity facade with being an interface to relational databases, and a bit less so, I suppose, with the service facade that could maybe be more rightly called a service engine, as it handles a lot of the service calls and orchestration and so on. The idea of a service-oriented architecture is one where instead of being object-oriented and using object-oriented patterns, we use service-oriented patterns like composition with typically with lightweight services to compose other services. And that's been one of the goals of the tools, is to have ways of writing lightweight services like XML actions for uh, sort of configuring other service calls, although XML actions can get far more elaborate, and you can get more complex business logic in there and such. So the early years of OFBiz were interesting because there was nothing really like it at the time, like an open source e-commerce and ERP suite that had fairly significant functionality. So in the e-commerce space, that's kind of in the main area where we were competing. There were big e-commerce applications, commercial ones were were mostly the ones used, like Blue Martini, Broadcom, um, a few of these types, and they were all typically very expensive. So companies had an incentive to look for an alternative. There was also a difficulty with some of them in terms of customization, which becomes very important for e-commerce. Um, One of the e-commerce suites I had the most experience before starting OFBiz was the WebLogic Commerce Suite, which was really more of just the WebLogic application server, and this is back in the day, and like in 2001, and it didn't, yeah, or in 2000, even when I was studying a lot of it. So it didn't have a lot in it, basically some logic and services, a basic data model for e-commerce, but you really had to build a lot on top of it in order to use it. And yet the licensing fee was fairly significant. So competing with such things and what existed at the time was not all that difficult, even though we were young and inexperienced and sort of just figuring it out as we went along. Um, the reception of OFIs was sort of fascinating. Had a lot of opportunities to work with smaller companies and larger companies. Um, Smaller companies that were either using it internally. The three target audiences that the Moqui website talks about, and that I think Michael will mention. I threw a quote in there for the vision part of this talk coming up, the second half hour of this first hour, and the three target audiences started to emerge and become more clear over that time, where we have end user organizations that are basically taking the software and using it internally, customizing it for their particular needs. And then there are service provider organizations who don't necessarily use the software internally, although there are benefits to doing so. And uh, I guess my experience with that is I didn't use OFBiz or Moqui for managing my own businesses until probably just about a year ago, or not even that, just a few months ago, late last year. I finally got an instance of Moqui set up and started using it for my own time tracking and generating invoices and all that sort of thing. So that process, the details for doing that, which screens to use and how rates are calculated and all that sort of thing. That's something that I'll cover in my presentation later today, with the introduction to Marble ERP. So, and then the third target audience is product companies. So we want these things to be liberally licensed so that those who are making commercial products, often software as a service products these days, though that wasn't always the case. And there are, even with Moqui, some on-premise oriented commercial products that are based on it. So, those are sort of the three main target audiences that started to emerge and become clear in the early days of OFBiz, and then became a focus, or helped kind of orient the objectives for Moqui as it was getting started. And again, those are end user organizations, service provider companies, and product companies or derivative product companies. But that was for me, that was a great learning experience, working with probably, I don't know, with OFBiz alone, well over 100 different companies, some of which were larger and many of which were smaller. So worked with a lot of companies where it's, 5 guys or 20 guys that are trying to build something, and in some cases startups, in some cases these were long-term consulting organizations that had existing clients and were looking for solutions that better met the needs of their clients. Some of the larger companies, this was also kind of fun. I got to travel to many places around the world and meet people in different places around the world, including British Telecom was a big one. I worked for a couple months with them on e-commerce for their broadband sales. That was the main place where OFBiz was used. And we also got into cell phone service, online sales, and that ended up being mostly a prototype that was a different sort of architecture and design than what they had done for broadband services. And if you hear me talk about the dangers of going with highly configurable software instead of embracing the fact that a little custom code can go a long ways, that's where a lot of that experience came from, was seeing what British Telecom went through with their projects. The original one that I helped with a little bit early on, and then ended up doing a sort of a post-mortem on when they got into some legal disputes with their service provider, and then trying this prototype of a different approach that had far less code, and while it was not so configurable, it was much easier to maintain and write the code as needed for screens for the e-commerce side, as well as managing certain things in the back end. But the screens for the e-commerce site, that's where they were trying to do it highly configurable. And the danger of that is you can never predict everything. And so things will come along over time. You can design all the configuration options you want, but things will come along where you just continually need to add new configuration options. So you're continually adding new code anyway, and it often works better. While configurable software can be very useful, if kept simple and flexible enough, that can certainly save you work over time. But when you go over the top with it and have it generating screens so that everything that appears on the screen has to go through the configuration tool, then it becomes problematic. And so that was also one of the experiences where I understood more thoroughly that highly configurable software is very important for enterprise solutions, because there's so many changing needs over time. Some of those are changing business context and business priorities, and some of those are different technical requirements. This comes up a lot, especially with integrations, where you don't often know in advance all of the systems that you're going to have to integrate with. Those might be additional tools to use internally, and especially more and more over time as businesses use automated communication for parts of their business processes to work with partners, whether they be suppliers or customers, integrations are increasingly important. So having flexibility in those areas is critical for being able to deliver on uh, what the end user organization needs. Um, so that was a pivotal era between, especially 2004 and 2007, probably is when OFBiz really took off. And toward the end of that, we joined the Apache Software Foundation. And that's why it's now called Apache OFBiz as opposed to just the Open for Business project and OFBiz for short. Um, so the software having evolved that way got a bit messy over time, and the community management model around it that's used at the Apache Software Foundation also became cumbersome and problematic in a few ways. It's a good model when you are building towards a specification or you have a good technical scope defined and technical objectives. Getting into business software, it's a bit trickier because uh, in terms of functionality, we can say the scope is even something simple like well, simplifying it, maybe oversimplifying it in these terms, but focusing on like end-to-end business processes like quote to cash or order to cash and procure to pay. That still includes an incredible amount of business scope and different needs of different businesses and different industries, as well as different sizes and different management styles and company structures, and all of these things play into variations in the software that a company needs. So managing it in the Apache way became problematic with too many fingers in the pot, if you will. I started to look around more at other open source projects and how they're managed. And the most useful model and the most successful model that seems to have emerged over time is the model used for the Linux kernel and also many other projects related to Linux. And that is the moderation model. And this is something I appreciate Linus Torvalds for very much, is kind of refining that moderation model and then even building source code management with Git around that moderation model. And with the idea of distributed development and distributed community-oriented development, more particularly, with easy forking of repositories, branching within repositories, and managing things in different ways using those tools. So that's been successful enough that GitOps has even become a term along with DevOps and stuff, getting into using Git more specifically, which was incredibly helpful for Moqui, even from the beginning. Initially, we weren't using Git, we were using Subversion, but still working in a moderation model. And then eventually moved to Git. It was clear there'd be benefits to that. And when that was done, GitHub was the easiest place to host it, and that's why Moqui is still there, even though GitHub has changed ownership and changed many things over time, and there are other very good options. It's been tempting to move to something like GitLab or even self-hosted GitLab, but staying on GitHub has been good enough and seems to suit the needs of Moqui as a community and most users of Moqui as well. Although many use other Git hosting services or even host their own Git repositories, but the other popular ones being like Atlassian's Bitbucket and GitLab, and I guess there are various others over time, but those are the main ones I'm aware of others using with Moqui. So so the moderation model has, I think, turned out very well. In Moqui, the community growth has been a little bit of a funny thing, but where I remain still as the primary moderator. But under the moderation model and with different contributions, especially with people helping to review and vet contributions that are coming in, it's not so much work to, even for one person, and even with a code base the size of the different repositories under the Moqui group on GitHub, it's not so much work to do that. There is potential for much more, and it's great in recent years, especially to see that there are many people who are building their own applications, making them available under open source licenses, um, and then sort of extending the ecosystem of Moqui beyond just the core Moqui projects that are in the Moqui group on GitHub. And so that I think overall the model has worked out very well for higher quality software, and still allowing it to be very community driven. Part of that gets into the future of Moqui, where what is going to come next? What are the features coming up, and where is it going to go? What's the roadmap? While I have various ideas about that and various things I've worked on over time, most of that is driven by the community of users around the open source projects. And it's always been that way. Even if you look at the commit history with a significant number of my commits, most of those have been done on contract for different clients, where they have driven the direction and helped refine and improve Moqui, even if it was me, putting my hands down and writing the code, or helping bring in contributions from others. So that it's very much a community-driven project, and I've very much enjoyed and appreciated the guidance of clients and learning from them, and improving Moqui over time, bringing in ideas from hundreds of people to make it what it is today, and also to set it up to become more and more over time. So that's another thing I wanted to say is I very much appreciate, including many people on this call who have made significant contributions, and whether they be ideas, funding, pushing this or that objective, pushing until my hard-headedness was overcome, and and I relented that, yes, these are good ideas. There are better ways, as opposed to my original thoughts and designs on various things. So, and I'm sure part of the reason for chuckles around is that many of you have experienced that. So, and so the current state of Moqui, I'll talk about that for a minute. It's kind of development has slowed down, not as many commits over the last year, partly because I've been working less and focusing on other things. And that's likely to continue in the future. I still plan to be involved, but there are other projects and other things that are becoming more important for me. So so it's good to see others getting more involved. And on that note, we have 2 new board members that the board has voted to invite, and that have joined recently, although haven't quite finalized that. We still need to work on that. And that's Gurudaram Khalsa and Michael Jones. And as everyone probably knows, Michael is my son, and it's been a great honor to see him finding benefit in Moqui, and establishing a career based on it, continuing with the work that I started, and joining many others who are finding benefit from it, which of everything is the most satisfying to me by far, that it has enabled many things and helped many people to do things that might not have been possible otherwise, given time and budget constraints, but at least would have been much more difficult otherwise. So, and that's really been largely the goal and the vision of Moqui, is to enable those who are using it to do the most of what they can with it and do it most efficiently, which is not often a goal for software. They'll talk about that in marketing materials, but having commercial concerns and preserving the market position of the company that runs software can conflict with that quite a bit. So more and more over time, I've become a strong believer in the power and benefit of open technology, and even more generally, and more recently, even been more impressed by how important in the world and for everyone in the world it is to have free and open access to technology. Um, it's interesting looking at the progression of humanity, where we as humans can do quite a bit with our minds and bodies, but having machines that assist us, especially automated or larger machines that we can control, has been a huge labor multiplier for humanity. And all of that comes down to technology and access to it. So one of the greatest differentiators these days between people and what they're able to do is not just what they can do as an individual, but the technology they have access to and they know how to use and apply. And um, so outside of us, the technology that we use, the machines, whether they be for computing or for moving things around or making things, um, those machines end up being much more significant in terms of what we can produce than what we can do with our hands, or even increasingly with our minds, working, especially working alone. And there's a lot of power with people working in collaboration, and then lately even more power with people working in collaboration using tools like artificial intelligence to supplement what we can do as humans. Um, we'll have more discussions on that over the course of this conference, and we have one panel discussion planned tomorrow that specifically on the topic of artificial intelligence, and that's the emergence of that, especially in recent months, and more so in recent years to some extent. But just in recent months, it's become incredibly popular and just taken off, both commercial and open source. And it's neat to see, while there were some commercial successes early on, and that made a lot of news, open source efforts are becoming significant and competing well with the commercial efforts. Um, so it's great to see that. Yeah. um, anyway, with that as an introduction to the conference and a little bit of the history and current status and future of OFBiz, Michael, if you're ready, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the vision of the project, with a little introduction that this is not meant to be something to drive the vision or try to define it on behalf of the community, but a recognition of how things have emerged, um, and to describe what the vision has been, and sort of what it has evolved to, if you will, which goes back even to some of those early days with OFBiz, um, where those of us involved were starting to see some of these different patterns and some of the different things that worked well and didn't work, and so on. So with that, Michael, why don't you go ahead?
All right. So that was great. Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. So as I've gotten more into Moqui, I've started to realize that we're missing something like a vision that really brings us together and focuses ourselves to like on a certain goal. And while we do have a reason that we all come here together, we haven't really articulated exactly what that is yet. And so part of what I'm trying to do is to articulate what exactly the vision that Moqui has, and bringing together what we do into a way that we can all kind of a way that guides our beliefs about Moqui, our beliefs about open source, about business, about technology, and all this kind of stuff. So I've prepared a presentation for this. I'm going to share my screen. So this is basically a Moqui vision. And so David has gone over the origin story of exactly what Moqui is, and kind of how it came out into being. And I was reading this book the other day called Start With Why, by Simon Sinek, or however you pronounce that. And the fundamental idea is that the best organizations, the best companies, the best people have a why in what they do. They have a purpose, they have a cause, they have a belief in what they do. And then everything that they do, the process of what they do, is a representation of the why. And so that's the process, the moderation process, that kind of thing. And there is the actual result of what we do, the software that we create. So a good example of this is Apple, that we believe in challenging the status quo and doing things differently. That's kind of their why. And I'm using them, and this is an example because everyone understands this one. And then how Apple does this is Apple creates products that are beautifully designed and easy to use. And the result of that, the what, is that Apple makes computers. And it's a much more powerful message than we make computers. Our products are beautifully designed and easy to use. There's something that people miss when they don't start with a purpose. That's kind of the idea of this book. And so this is about what is the purpose of Moqui? Why does Moqui exist? And why do people use it in their businesses and put in effort in the work that it takes to use it and develop applications and all this kind of stuff? So I have some ideas about this, but the ideas are just ones that I have, and it's not up to me to actually figure out what the vision is. It's up to the community and to actually articulate what the reason is for why we're here. So one reason why we're here is that Moqui enables businesses to do things that they otherwise couldn't. And the idea behind this is that like this is why Moqui is free. This is why it's open source software. This is why it's very permissive in its licensing. And early on in Moqui and OFBiz, there were companies that didn't work out because before they actually came, they didn't work out because the software was too expensive, or it was too complicated, or because really the software wasn't good enough. And so technology is there to enable what a business does and the process of that. Another potential why is that Moqui enables and facilitates business automation software solutions for end user organizations, service providers, and product companies with a freely licensed technical tool and business artifact foundation, along with a limited set of screens and customizable applications. This is what David wrote for the why, and I think that it kind of nails on the head the target audience and kind of what it is and how it works. Guru Dharam wrote another why about providing open access to technology with the domain of future business automation software. And I think that it's really important to have like a mission statement. Like this is why companies have a vision and why they have a mission statement, is because this is what orients the project towards a higher goal and and brings people together. Now, it isn't just about the vision, it's also about how this vision is brought out to place. Because if you just say that your vision is something, this is very common in businesses, that they will say that this is the vision, they will say that these are the values, but it really isn't enacted out in everything that they do and how they do it and what they do. And so part of the reason for Moqui, whatever that is, how we bring it out to play is through open source software that anyone can use or modify for free, that enables a community of collaboration. And in this open source model of collaboration is really vital to everyone here. And like this is what makes this software work, where we don't necessarily without getting money for our software, for a open source project to really survive, we have to have moderators and we have to have contributors and we have to have people that come in and contribute to the software so that it will grow and expand over time. And the what is also difficult to define, but it's basically a framework for creating web applications that are cheaply customized, well architected, and broadly applicable. And I think that this is important because as our vision is implemented, as our actual purpose for why we do what we do is implemented, we actually have we have this product that proves it, and that we really have made a lot of progress in what Moqui is and what it can be. And it's really it's really great to see people use it and in different scenarios in business, and that is really where the value of Moqui comes from, is in people actually using it. And so Moqui is used in lots of different places, from small to large e-commerce businesses, bank account and loan origination software. We're actually in the Alchemy office right now, and that's what they use Moqui for. And rendering farm billing, which is that a good?
Yeah,
It's good. Close enough. Okay. I wasn't exactly sure what that should be, but it's used in so many of these businesses, and I think that that's really where a lot of the value of Moqui comes from. And yeah, so the reason why I got into Moqui in the first place is because it was basically my first job out of high school. I was writing tests for Moqui. I was working on robots, but as I was going to school and doing all this stuff, and school wasn't super great. It was during COVID, and I just didn't do as well as I probably could have. Just wasn't the right environment for me. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up seeing, well, could I actually do a career with Moqui? And I ended up learning a lot and hired by some people, and I ended up getting a career from it for developing software, and it's given me a lot of blessings and what I actually and what I'm able to do and make money for myself and provide for myself. But I've also seen it help a lot of businesses in what they've been able to do. And it's really incredible. I was talking to someone on the plane yesterday, and I was kind of trying to explain what Moqui was, and they kept asking, "Are you Series A? Are you Series B? Are you like that's
the only way software companies launch."
Yeah, I mean, it's really, yeah, and like I thought that was really funny, and I realized what we're doing here is really, it's really amazing that it actually works. Like a lot of, like, most people, they don't really think about this kind of thing. They don't really realize that this is possible. And I think that getting the word out there that this is really a thing, and that there's great software out there that's free, that works, and you don't have to pay for it. There isn't massive licensing fees. It can really make a huge difference in what businesses and technology can do. And so I'd like to bring it up for a discussion about, or for some stories that people have about what they've used Moqui for, and the benefit that they've gotten from it. So if anyone is interested in that, that'd be great.
Does anyone? Sorry, we're managing mics in the conference room here. Maybe if anybody on the web conference wants to start. Anybody want to start with any? Sorry, I'm jumping in.
Yeah, that's great.
Stealing the agenda a little bit. Does anybody online want to share anything? Jens, I know you're working on some interesting things. Maybe you want to update us?
You might as well go first, Vince, and then
I don't think we have
inspire
audio.
others to do the same.
There we go. If someone says something between what he asked, we couldn't hear it here at the.
I was just saying, Vince, you might as well go first if you want to share, and then others will get ideas as you're talking.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, we're navigating mics here. I think I'm up next in the next session, so I'll have an opportunity to do a little show and tell.
Real quick, just a second, Michael, you may need to mute since you're in the same room. Yeah. You got that? Okay, cool.
Did you hear me, David?
No.
Sorry.
I guess there's still some echoing going on there. Someone's got a hot mic.
Hey guys, sorry. Can you hear me, David?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. I was just saying I'm up next on the conference agenda, I think. So I'll have an opportunity to talk about in more detail probably, but I wanted to give people on the conference a chance to jump in. If anybody wants to share anything.
And I'll be speaking later today, but it feels to me like Moqui, much like Linux, has an opportunity to kind of democratize software and make more powerful options available to a wider audience. But it feels like in order to do that, it needs to be perhaps a little more easily accessible. I'll be talking about that in some respects later on, but I'd be interested in other people's thoughts on that. But it feels like that ability to democratize or to empower businesses, especially businesses with purpose, is a powerful force for good. I think it's something we should embrace and make the most of.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
I guess as a teaser, I could mention a few other industries, and there's some other people in the conference who are involved with some of these things. But so Michael mentioned banking and finance, and in addition to Alchemy, there are some other companies involved that do that, that are in that industry. There's also the agriculture industry. That's actually where, so in 2014, when I transitioned to working full-time on Moqui instead of OFBiz, that was the first big gig that I had that helped build out a lot of the service library and refine the data model and such. And that was for primarily fruit, but some other produce, packing, and to some extent field management and that sort of thing. One of the big areas it's taken off is brand companies. There are a lot of these in the United States and other parts of the world where they design products, they outsource the manufacturing, they sell them both retail and wholesale. It's one of the reasons why retail and wholesale sales both have been a priority for Moqui, and there's quite a bit to handle that. The more custom solutions built on it have gotten into human resources, which is difficult to do in an open source project given the ongoing legal changes where pretty much constant maintenance is required. And in the United States, that involves focusing on different states and such. So if you look in the service library, you'll see a number of things related to human resources and payroll processing and that sort of thing, though it's not nearly complete as a finished solution. It's a decent starting point, but that is a very complicated like software domain to get into. Historically, OFBiz has been in a few other industries, and I guess there have been some in travel and communication, those sorts of things. Not projects that I'm as familiar with, but even also in healthcare, pharmacy, and doctor management. Let's see. I'm not sure if there are really there are quite a few industries, especially if you look at industries from a high level perspective. There are quite a few different industries that Moqi's been involved with. So if you heard me mention your project and what you're doing with Moqui, I think there's some others on the call who are included in this summary that I gave. Then yeah, feel free to share with the few minutes we have.
Hey everyone, my name is Lawrence Tran. The company I work at is Noggin, and we actually have been using Moqui since 2018. So that's probably something I'm going to be talking about in Saturday or so. But we're in the e-commerce space, and we use it pretty extensively through kind of the order management, warehousing, and just kind of business operations and integrations. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and I plan to share a little bit more about that.
Great. As we wrap up here, what I'd like to kind of set forth for a potential objective for this conference is for what is the purpose of Moqui? Why are we here? Why do we do what we do? And what kind of a community, what kind of message can we tell about ourselves, about what we're actually doing here and why? And so I'd like to pass it off And I think,
Yeah, should we take a break for a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and then so we'll start around 5 after the hour with Vince, your presentation.
yep, let's do that.
Does that sound good? Okay. So I'm going to stop recording for now, and we'll see everyone in a few minutes.
Okay.